Learn the most empowering hiring techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with your host, Rick Gerard.
All right, so you're walking down a path and you trip. You catch yourself, but you end up cutting your hand in the process. Now, quickly, you brush off the debris and you assess the damage. The first order of action is to stop the pain. Now, you had not prepared to get cut your hand today, but you do understand that what needs to be done. You quickly scramble to find a Band-Aid to stop the bleeding. So you grab whatever's available and you use it, figuring out it's good enough. Entrepreneurs, this is your hiring process, essentially triage and damage control. Now, you did not plan to have to delegate responsibilities to accommodate for your growth or replace somebody who just quit, so you react quickly. The first course of action is to find a person to Band-Aid the wound, often hiring the first reasonable person who presents themselves and creating a bigger issue for the future. Now, today's conversation is about being prepared to hire by first having a strong strategy to implement rather than reacting quickly. I'm Rick Gerard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest people. We do so by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today. He is the chairman of Hire Better and managing partner of Bee Cave Capital, Kurt Wilkin. Now, Kurt is a gifted connector of dots, ideas, and people. He's a serial entrepreneur with multiple successful exits and has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs and CEOs build their companies. Kurt has called Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas his home his entire life and proudly claims to have redneck Cajun hillbilly rolled up into one beautiful package. He's the author of the best-selling book, Who's Your Mike? And his firm Hire Better works with leaders of high-growth companies to build game-changing teams, which is what makes Kurt the perfect expert for today's topic. Kurt, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me. I love the intro, and I also love the analogy of putting the pain out as soon as possible with whoever you can find. That's what most entrepreneurs do, hire very reactively.
Yeah, so very, very true. And, like, hey, as recruiters, we make our career from that. If it doesn't work well, we'll just find you another one. But that's not a good business model for now. Now that I'm more of an entrepreneur and I have my own software company, I got to tell you, it's painful.
Well, you're exactly right. That's how the traditional, contingent recruiting industry is built, to prey off of people who have to move as fast as humanly possible. And it's really a sales role. All they got to do is sell their candidate as fast as they can to you and move on to the next role. So you just described the traditional contingent recruiting industry in a few words.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So let's talk about like kind of proactive versus reactive hiring. I love this subject because, quite frankly, I mean, I don't think we can talk about it enough. And, I like you, I speak at events and I'm an EOer. So I talk to, EO quite often. And one of the things that I do talk about is that, hey, look at you don't know when you're going to have to hire, but start planning, start talking to people, like start actually understanding what you need before you just, oh shit, I got to hire somebody. Right. So, almost every entrepreneur I know does reactive hiring. I got to hire somebody, and then they get all excited and then it doesn't work out. Right. So what do you see as being the biggest problem with this?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you hit the nail on the head when you said that hiring reactively. And what I would encourage folks to do is, man, if I can think 12 to 18 months out, like what am I trying to build? I can make a badass hire, and I don't need a recruiter's help probably. But if I'm needing to hire somebody yesterday because somebody quit or because some emergency, I'm probably going to make a rushed hire, and it's probably not going to work out. So beyond that, the biggest challenge that I saw when I got into this industry, and by the way, my background's not recruiting. I've been in professional services almost 30 years, but a lot of that was at Ernst & Young as a failed CPA, let's say recovering CPA. And then about 8 years with my own firm that I grew to about 120 professionals. But recruiting I got into because I knew that there had to be a better way to help entrepreneurs grow than just the traditional recruiting industry. So beyond being reactive, the other big thing that we saw, Rick, is most entrepreneurs, especially if you're doing this for the first time, you get a lot of advice. You mentioned you're an EO, so maybe somebody in your EO forum, maybe it's your banker, maybe your lawyer, maybe your brother, whatever. And you get advice. Hey, Rick, you need a chief sales officer. You need a chief financial officer. You need a VP of ops. And so we those words mean a lot, especially if it's an investor or advisor or, board member. And so oftentimes we're like, well, what the fuck does the CFO do? Let's go Google search, job description CFO, and you get a lot of stuff that sounds great. And so one of the things we saw is people are searching for something that they don't necessarily need. And for a lot of reasons we'll get into soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you hit the nail on the head. People hiring without knowing what they truly need, right? And then the other thing is hiring reactively. So why is it that we don't know what we truly need?
Well, again, a lot of us are going through this for the first time, so we're getting advice and it all sounds good. The other thing that's, on a related note is we have a legacy team that got us to where we are. And we see the gaps that they have. We know we don't have a finance person, for example, if we're looking for a CFO, but we don't really know what the existing team truly provides. And so what I tell companies is, let's take a step back. Let's stop all this craziness, chaotic. We need somebody yesterday. Let's take a step back and let's spend some time really focusing on what we're trying to build. And so the example I like to use is I've got say a $10 million company, and I want to grow to 20 million or 50 million, you name a number. And the question is, well, okay, how am I going to get there? What am I going to accomplish to help me get there? And it may be just legacy growth, or what most often happens is we're going to open a new office in Santa Monica, or we're going to launch a new product, or maybe we're going to buy a competitor. And so the answer that you provide really helps me determine what talent you need. And so then I like to ask the question, okay, who's going to drive that initiative? Who's going to open that new office? Who's going to launch the new product? And most entrepreneurs have a very gritty, wear 21 hats. They're doing whatever it takes to get by. And so you've got somebody on your team that, for this example, I'll call it Mike because it's the title of my book, Who's Your Mike? So Mike raises his hand and says, look, I can go open your new office. And the reality is Mike's never done this before. And so he's probably going to either learn a lot of lessons the hard way and really slow your growth substantially, or he's going to fail miserably. And so what I like to do is really take a look at what we are going to need. Who do we need to drive those initiatives, and then assess our existing team against those. And more often than not, we need to bring somebody in from the outside to drive those key growth initiatives.
That's such a good point. Just taking that step back to think about it and really, really have the discussion rather than and it's hard for us entrepreneurs because we want to move fast, we want to get things done.
So, hey, I mentioned Mike. Let me give you the little background on the story. The name of the book is called Who's Your Mike? It did reach bestseller status. The subtitle is what's the subtitle, Rick?
God, I don't even have it in front of me. Wait, you can put me on the spot.
It's the people you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. It's really it's a fun book about all the types of employees you're going to have. And the title character is Mike. And so the example is one that almost every entrepreneur either has had or will have, or maybe has right now. And so Mike is a good guy. And in this example, he's a guy. It could be a girl. And he has been with you through thick and thin, and really probably started with your company or very early on. And you're more outgoing and maybe visionary. Maybe you created a great product, but you needed someone to do all the blocking and tackling, all the setting up the bank account, the LLC, the ordering office supplies, setting up your office, all this stuff. And so Mike joined you, and over time you promoted Mike to be your accountant because you trusted him with your life, and he freaking learned QuickBooks on his own for you.
Yeah. And
then over time, the next promotion is a controller because he's working 100 hours a week, and you want to, honor that and be appreciative. And so then ultimately you promote him to CFO. And every private equity person that might be listening to the show has this example in every one of their portfolio companies. but you promoted to CFO, and now all of a sudden you're a real company. You're doing $10-15 million in revenue. Mike has never built a team. He doesn't know how to build a team. He's learning all this for the first time, maybe through ChatGPT or YouTube, but he's going to make a lot of mistakes and learn lessons the hard way. But he's also just in over his head. And so he's trying to negotiate a big line of credit with the bank or a merger agreement, and he doesn't know what he's doing. So the question is, for every entrepreneur, who's your Mike? Every entrepreneur either has had one, will have one, or does have one.
So very true. Are you listening to the Higher Power Radio Show? I'm your host, Rick Gerard. And for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. All right, I'm digging in deeper with our guest, Kurt Wilkin. He's the chairman of Hire Better and managing partner of Bee Cave Capital. We're talking about, actually, he just kind of gave us a good lowdown on who's your Mike, right? And the story behind, this is actually really reminiscent. I don't know if you read the book by Marshall Goldsmith called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and it's very similar, kind of case study of like if your business wants to get to that next level, you really have to look at the people that you have, and in most cases, higher up, right?
Very often the case. In fact, a friend of mine works in that industry and asked me if I wanted to try to partner with Marshall for "Who Got You Here Won't Get You There."
Ooh, I like that. That's so you're gonna do it?
Well, I need to. Well, I don't want to write another book is probably the real answer, but
Okay.
I needed to pursue it just to see what it would take.
Very cool. All right, so let's dig into how do we solve this problem, right? Because there's a couple of steps here that I think, number one, you got to, you hit the nail on the head, taking a step back, and really, kind of building out that strategy first. So let's talk a little bit about. You've got a couple of different steps that you recommend or that you roll through. Like, what step those out for me, and then let's break those down.
Yeah, so I guess I jumped right to solution, didn't I? A little bit with the example, but let's stick on that example. You've got a couple of employees on your team who really have no idea what they're doing, and you need to upgrade your team. You've flatlined. You're having more challenges. You're maybe less profitable than you were or you should be, and so you recognize there's challenges. So let's take a look at our existing team. Again, going back to what do we want to build? What are those key initiatives? What does our existing team look like? The questions I like to ask are a few that I've stolen and amalgamated over the years, Rick. And if I'm trying to assess my existing team, it's really 4 key questions. Knowing today what you know about your organization and where you're going, would you enthusiastically rehire Mike for the same job? So again, Mike's your CFO. He's a great guy and he's loyal and he's got a lot of legacy knowledge, but would you rehire him enthusiastically for the CFO role? The answer is usually no when we do this exercise with clients. Doesn't mean he needs to go. It just means he's not in the right seat. The next question
it's usually that he doesn't have the capacity to be able to do it. I mean, to get you to where you want to go. I mean,
that's very true, which dovetails into the next question was, does he have the skills, tools, and experience necessary to get you to that, proverbial next level?
Yeah.
Again, the answer is no. Now, in some cases, maybe we can bring in a mentor or a coach and help him grow if we have the time to absorb that. Now, if you have a 5-person leadership team and all 5 of you are doing this for the first time, it's really hard to get enough coaches and do it properly. You probably need 1 or 2 people who've done this before. So my last 2 questions, Rick, are more gut questions, which are probably more appropriate for your entrepreneurial audience because we manage by gut and intuition a lot. And that is, what if Rick came into your office and quit tomorrow? How would you feel? And that one hits hard because like the initial reaction is, oh shit, what would I do? Because Rick does a lot of stuff. But if you really started to think about it, Rick's probably doing you a favor by coming in and resigning.
Yeah.
And sorry, I didn't mean to use Rick instead of Mike. It just slipped out of my mouth.
That's okay. I'll be your guinea pig any day, Kurt.
and the last one is, what if I had an entire team of Mikes? Mike is, some of what he does is beautiful, but man, if I had to deal with that chaos and that drama every day, I would shoot myself. So those are the 4 questions I like to have entrepreneurs ask.
And then And then from that, you're asking these questions, you're writing down your answers, and then what? How do you utilize that information, or how do you put that into action?
Yep. So I'm looking at the main functions of my company, and I'm seeing where the gaps are.
Yep.
And if you have, depending on your industry, 6 or 8 type mega functions, operations, sales, marketing, the whole bit. If you've got, you're going to have a couple of folks who are, you're pleased with what they do. You would rehire them. Okay. And then you look at the gaps. Okay. Mike's a good controller. He's not a good CFO. Let's set out a plan for him. Maybe a coach. My VP of sales is really a glorified individual contributor. He's in over his head. So I need to put him back into that individual contributor role and bring in a more of a sales leader, sales manager. Maybe I have 0 marketing function to get me where I need to go. So basically I'm rolling out a talent roadmap, Rick, that over the next, let's say 12 to 18 months, I can execute. And it's not all new hires. Some of them are, as I mentioned, we're coaching people up or bringing in consultants for some roles, and some are definitely new hires. So it's really creating a roadmap for where we want to go, as opposed to just knee jerking and hiring this, ready, fire, aim, as we like to say.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of times where somebody gets on the bandwagon about, hey, we need to hire a CFO. And yet really all they need is a fractional CFO to come in and kind of help do the work and maybe coach up. Right. So asking those questions about really how much time is going to be required for this role is another thing that I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs think about. It's like, oh, I got to cut. I need to Band-Aid it up. And they're smart enough. They'll be able to figure it out and tell me, what needs to be done. That's the other thing that I've seen way too often. If we hire the right person, they'll tell us what we need to do.
So that's what I call a silver bullet hire. And you're relying on somebody, A, who's not bullshitting you during the interview process, right?
Yeah.
And B, you end up with a lot of what I like to call in the book, resume Ralph, somebody who looks great on paper and just doesn't fit the bill. And it's even worse when that person's recommended, as I mentioned, like by an advisor or a good friend, because you're like, I got to hire Rick. I'm not even going to go through the entire interview process because he was recommended by Kurt. I trust Kurt. And at the end of the day, you've just got a mishmash. You've got a bad fit.
Yeah, that happens more often than not. Like I've seen that happen. I like to call those vanity hires in a way, because essentially you're not vetting somebody properly for your organization. You're just running off of somebody's recommendation.
Yeah.
Whenever anybody's referral that happens, you just got to take a step back and say, hey, look, we still have to run our full interview process no matter what.
Yeah. Whenever we get that request, we say, look, I'm happy to support your hire, but let's do this. Why don't we scope the position, really determine what you truly need, and then we'll assess that person against it. And if there's a good fit, great. And if not, so be it. And you mentioned something else, Rick, that jogged my mind, and that is we have, let's say we have this 5-person leadership team, and we've got the functions covered, and somebody says you need a CFO. Well, your CFO for your 5 people might look different than my CFO for my 5 people. Meaning, let's say you have a really strong accountant on your team who can do a lot of the controller functions. So you need some forward-looking finance, but you have a gap in the ops area. So maybe I get a CFO with some strong operational skills and the finance skills to augment my team versus a CFO that's got strong accounting skills. I've already got that covered. So in other words, it's a puzzle, and I'm trying to fit the right pieces of the puzzle for that stage of growth for the next, let's say, 2 years. And if you're growing rapidly, 2 years is probably plenty of time. You might have to redo this in 2 years because you've outgrown members of that team. So that's really the interesting conundrum for entrepreneurs. If you don't want this problem, just don't grow. But if you're going to grow, you're going to have people problems.
So true. Now, I'd like to add one thing to this, is that one of the things I found very helpful is start planning. Like, if you do your strategic planning, start planning on locating people that you want to reach out to at some point. And I do a thing every Friday for an hour and a half. It's called Filling the Funnel. And essentially what I do is I just go through LinkedIn. I look at my org chart and who I'm going to have to hire over the next year. And I just start reaching out to the people for an hour via LinkedIn. Hey, you know what? I'm CEO of this company. I'm going to be hiring in the next year. Just thought I'd take a minute to introduce myself to you and see if you'd like to get to know each other for the future. you'd be amazed on what kind of traction that produces, so that when you have that need that opens up, now I've got 2 or 3 or 4 people that I can call that'll take my call, that I can actually engage, that aren't necessarily on the active job market. They're passive candidates, and I'm a big fan of passive talent.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And you're basically building a virtual bench.
Yeah.
And in your case, you actually told them that you're going to be looking to hire. I've seen in my case, I didn't tell them I was looking to hire, but I wanted to network and get to know them and help tell them what I'm building and try to build some sizzle. And then, more often than not, they want to come work with you. That the challenge for me is, and this is a dirty little secret for me, is I'm not very good at hiring. I'm more like most of your entrepreneurs. I like everybody. So I tell my team, before you hire, an employee for me, make sure that you vetted them fully and you are fully on board, because I'm only, giving them the sales pitch. I'm not really going to be a great screener. And I think most entrepreneurs are similar. We're going to probably want to hire more people than we should, because we're just glass half full folks.
Totally. And I think we are the bottleneck when it comes to that, because I like everybody too. I have to really check myself. And it's good that you have other people to check and vet people, because quite frankly, like it's just in our nature, right?
That's the good thing about, being the managing partner of a recruiting firm or chairman of a recruiting firm, because I've got access to resources.
Yeah.
Let me touch on something because I know a lot of if your audience are more entrepreneurial and CEOs, they probably have heard of things like EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and other things like that are systems. And more often than not, we're very, let's say, visionary in nature. We're not very good at tactics and operations, right?
Yeah.
And so we need somebody on our team that's good at that. And oftentimes we're recommended to go find a number 2 or an operating partner or an integrator, however you want to phrase it. And it's a challenge for us to hire that role. So I always encourage folks to don't just do it solo. And it's also hard to engage your team, who this person is going to report to really be a good screening mechanism, because it's hard to hire your boss, especially if they're going to hold you accountable. So I encourage folks to find an advisor, a YPO forum mate, a Vistage mate, somebody who knows you and knows operations, to be part of your interview team to really help you make a great hire.
That's a great point. All right. So third phase, we're kind of touching on this right now, is once you've got that talent roadmap, that execution phase, right? So run me through what the execution phase should look like in actually, getting this person on board.
Yeah. I started off by saying, if I have 12 to 18 months, I can make a great hire. If you have to hire somebody tomorrow, I'm going to make a really crappy hire. And that's part of what we're doing when we execute. So we've got a talent roadmap now. Let's say there's 6 or 8 steps. Hire a CFO with certain skills, like here are the specific skills. Coach up our VP of sales. Get rid of, terminate our VP of ops, certain steps along the way. And I want to really encourage your audience. We don't need to do this today. We can set the plan today, but we execute it over a period of time. So we can be planning for walking our VP of ops out the door, or, giving them a package, whatever that case is, in 30 to 60 to 90 days. Meanwhile, we've at least begun game planning for the search. It's also tricky to conduct a search with someone active in the seat, and you don't want them to find out. So there's all these steps along the way you want to try to make sure are balanced and executable and structured, right? And I'm not trying to make all your entrepreneurs into structure, nerds, but we need to have some level of a plan, like following a map.
Yeah, the way in which things are executed is important, right? Like, and again, you don't have to do it all day. I actually, in our conversation, I think one of the things you said to me is you need to execute in a way that avoids organ failure, right? Such a great way of putting that, because quite frankly, to do a great search, you're looking at least 90 days, and you have time. I've had one executive search that I got lucky and was able to, get the strongest person in the right seat, like in 4 weeks, I think it was. But that was completely luck. You may get lucky, but timing's everything when it comes to search. It may not be the right timing for that person right now, but next month it might be. So, it's just, your point on being patient and thoughtful about it is definitely key.
Yeah.
All right, shoot. Well, so we're getting pretty close on time. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways, Kurt, that you can give the audience so they can plug into their business today?
Well, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is just a mental note, and that is just know that you are not alone. Every entrepreneur struggles with hiring. We struggle with holding on to employees too long. We struggle with being too loyal. So all of those things, just know that you're not alone. I think that alone is a healthy tidbit for folks.
That's true.
And the other is just know your strengths and weaknesses. As we talked earlier about having certain skills and partnering with somebody who's got those operational skills, know where you're strong. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to acknowledge that it's hard for them to it's not hard for them to recruit talent. It's hard for them to vet and screen talent. And so they might be unwilling to take advice or help. So just know your own strengths and weaknesses.
For sure. And always ask for help.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
So true. Kurt, thanks so much for your time investment today. And I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of the audience can find you, your book, all that good stuff?
Well, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. It's Kurt, K-U-R-T, Wilkin, W-I-L-K-I-N. And I've got Who's Your Mic. It's who'syourmic.com. W-H-O apostrophe S. You obviously know apostrophe in the domain name. And then lastly, if you want to check out my podcast, which you were on a few weeks ago, it's called Unlocking Moves. So what are those key moves that are going to unlock your success?
I learned a few things from your podcast, so I'm starting to implement them into mine. So
perfect. Let's go. I inspired you. That's the whole key.
You did.
And Rick, thanks for having me, man. This has been a blast.
This week's episode. Oh, absolutely. I'll have you back again. We'll keep doing this. All right. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in this week's episode of Higher Power Radio. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. Please subscribe, review, and share the podcast. After all, this show's for you, and we want to make sure that we're providing valuable content to you week after week. You can check us out further at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, R-A-D-I-O.com. You can drop me an email at rick@intertrue.ai. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to hiring success, Rick Gerard.